me! She won't last! I won't let you!
If that heavy nurse is my shield, then I am already dead. Dante Moretti murmured loud enough for every armed man in the private clinic to hear. Mara Quinn kept her gloved hand steady on his bleeding shoulder, though the insult landed like a slap beneath the white surgical lights. 10 minutes later, a masked attacker came through the service door with a blade meant for Dante's throat, and the room discovered exactly what kind of woman he had mocked. Mara did not scream. She did not stumble. She disarmed the man, broke his balance, and left him gasping against the marble floor without blinking. Some kings learn humility from prayer. Dante learned it from his nurse. Mara Quinn had spent 9 years saving men who thought money made them immortal. But Dante Moretti was the first patient arrogant enough to insult her while bleeding through a $3,000 shirt. He was Boston's most feared underworld ruler, and someone had just tried to assassinate him inside a private medical wing. Mara looked like a soft target to everyone in that room, a beautifully plus-size nurse with lush curves, calm eyes, and quiet hands. What nobody knew was that she had grown up in a police training basement where her father taught officers how to survive knife attacks. The first secret of that night was simple. Mara had promised never to fight again unless someone forced death directly into her path. The private clinic beneath the old Whitcomb Hotel was not listed on any hospital directory, and that was exactly why men like Dante Moretti used it. Above ground, the hotel hosted diplomats, opera donors, and velvet-voiced charity committees. Below ground, behind coded elevators and mirrored corridors, surgeons removed bullets from men who could not explain them to ordinary emergency rooms. Mara worked there 3 nights a week because private trauma paid enough to cover her mother's medication and her younger sister's nursing tuition. She wore deep teal scrubs that skimmed the fullness she carried, practical shoes, and no jewelry except the silver cross her father had left behind. She carried her curves with quiet confidence because she knew bodies were built to endure more than fashion magazines ever understood. That confidence had not come easily. Mara had been called too big by classmates, too soft by supervisors, too much by men who wanted women to shrink beside them. In public, she answered cruelty with professionalism. In private, she sometimes stood before her bathroom mirror and touched the magnificent slope of her hips as if negotiating peace with a battlefield. Yet in the clinic, her hands never doubted themselves. She could start an IV in darkness, detect internal shock from a pulse, and organize a trauma bay while surgeons shouted over one another. Her secret talent was not only medical. Her body remembered footwork, leverage, wrist control, and the brutal geometry of close danger. Before her father died in a warehouse raid, he had made her practice every escape until panic became slower than muscle memory. That night began with shouting in the freight elevator. The security camera flickered, the red alarm light blinked twice, and 6 men in black suits burst into the underground corridor with Dante Moretti between them. He walked instead of being carried, which told Mara more about his pride than his injury. Blood soaked the left side of his white shirt, rain darkened his black hair, and fury sharpened every angle of his face. He wore a masterfully tailored charcoal suit that looked ruined and expensive at the same time. His jawline seemed chiseled from granite. His shoulders were broad enough to make the hallway narrow, and his dark, predatory eyes swept the clinic like he was deciding who owned the oxygen. Treatment room 2, Mara ordered snapping on gloves before the surgeon even arrived. One of Dante's guards blocked her with a palm the size of a dinner plate. Only senior staff touches him. Mara looked at the hand then, at the blood dripping steadily from Dante's sleeve. Then your senior staff can explain why he lost another pint while you were guarding your ego. A few heads turned. Dante's eyes locked on her for the first time, cold and assessing. You are the nurse. His gravelly baritone filled the corridor without rising. Yes, they sent me someone who looks like she needs help moving equipment. The insult froze the room. Mara felt it pass through every guard, every assistant, every watching face, and settle on her skin like ash. A young resident looked away. Another nurse pressed her lips together, afraid to defend her. Dante's consigliere, Luca Bellini, merely studied Mara with narrowed silver eyes, as if the insult had revealed something useful about everyone present. Mara's heartbeat kicked once hard. The old shame rose with familiar teeth, but she swallowed it whole. "If you are finished evaluating my shape, Mr. Moretti, I need to evaluate your wound." Dante gave a short, humorless laugh. "Careful, nurse. Confidence is easy when no one has tested your weight." Heat climbed Mara's throat. She wanted to step back. She wanted to make herself smaller, quieter, invisible. Instead, she reached for trauma shears and cut through his sleeve. "Lucky for you," she replied. "I'm paid to keep rude men alive." The room breathed again, but not comfortably. Dante lowered himself onto the table with a wince he disguised as anger. Mara cleaned the wound, packed pressure, and watched the monitor rather than his face. The bullet had only grazed muscle, but the angle suggested the shooter had meant to kill him from close range. She noticed powder residue on his cuff, a tear near his ribs, and the way his right hand kept flexing toward a gun no one had allowed past the medical door. She also noticed the ceiling vent above the west service entrance vibrating slightly, though the air system was supposed to be off during sterile prep. Her father's voice rose inside her memory. "When the room feels wrong, trust the room before you trust the people." Dante saw her glance toward the west door. "Something interesting," he muttered. Maybe Mara answered, taping gauze with efficient pressure. "Your clinic has a security problem." His eyes sharpened. "My men cleared the floor. Your men cleared what they expected." That earned silence. Luca stepped closer. "What did you see?" Before Mara could answer, the light above the west service entrance shifted from green to amber. A tiny sound followed, metallic and deliberate, hidden beneath the monitor's beep. One guard finally reached for his weapon. Too late. The door slammed open, and a masked man in a stolen maintenance jacket drove into the room with a knife low against his forearm, moving not toward the guards, but straight toward Dante's exposed throat. Mara moved before fear could find her. She shoved the instrument tray into the attacker's knees, stepped inside the arc of the blade, and caught his wrist with both hands. Her size, so often mistaken for slowness, became mass anchor and command. The attacker tried to twist free, but Mara dropped her center of gravity and turned his momentum against him the way her father had taught her 1,000 times on padded concrete. The knife flashed past her cheek. She did not blink. Her hip checked his balance, her shoulder drove into his chest, and his body hit the marble with a sound that stunned every armed man in the room. She pinned his wrist beneath her knee and slid the blade away with the toe of her shoe. For 3 seconds, nobody spoke. The attacker wheezed against the floor, one cheek pressed to the cold marble. Dante stared from the treatment table, still half-raised blood, forgotten his obsidian eyes fixed on Mara, as if the entire world had rearranged itself around her. The guard who had blocked her earlier stood useless with his gun finally drawn. Mara looked up at him, breathing hard but controlled. "You can secure him now," she said. "Unless you would like me to invoice for security work too." Luca was the first to move snapping orders, in a voice like steel wrapped in silk. 2 men dragged the attacker upright. Another recovered the knife. Dante did not look at them. He looked only at Mara. "Everyone out," Dante ordered. His voice was quiet, but the room emptied as if he had fired a gun. Luca hesitated at the door. Dante's eyes never left Mara. "You too." The consigliere obeyed, closing the door behind him with careful discretion. Mara turned back to the medical cart, pretending her pulse was not hammering. "That was reckless," Dante said. She laughed, once sharp and breathless. "That is an interesting thing to say from a man who came into my clinic, bleeding after being shot." His mouth tightened. "Where did you learn that?" "Around. Do not lie to me." Mara pulled off one blood-smeared glove. "Then do not ask questions like you own the answers." The air between them hardened, dangerous and electric. Dante shifted upright despite the wound. "I mocked you," he said at last. "Then you saved my life." Mara met his gaze for the first time without professional distance. "Yes." The word sat between them, small and merciless. "Are you waiting for an apology?" he asked. "No. I have learned not to wait for things men only offer after being proven wrong." Something flickered across his face, not guilt exactly, but the beginning of it. He was not used to being spoken to without fear. Mara could feel that. She could also feel the strange pressure of his attention, darker now, less dismissive and far more unsettling. He looked at her lush, generous figure again, but this time there was no ridicule in his gaze. Only calculation. Only fascination. My father trained police officers, she admitted, because the silence had become too sharp. Defensive tactics, close quarters, knife survival. I grew up watching men twice my size get dropped because they confused weight with weakness. Dante absorbed the confession slowly. And you stopped. My father died because violence always sends invoices to families who did not sign for the dead. Her voice thinned before she could catch it. I became a nurse because I wanted to put bodies back together, not break them. Dante's expression changed in a way she did not trust. It softened and darkened at once like a storm seen through glass. Tonight my debt reached your hands. Then keep your debt away from me. He smiled faintly, but there was no humor in it. Too late. The door opened before Mara could answer. Luca entered with the recovered knife sealed in a clear evidence bag, his silver eyes cooler than the surgical lights. He carried a Rossetti token. Dante went utterly still. Even Mara, who knew almost nothing about Mafia politics, recognized the name from whispered clinic gossip. The Rossetti family controlled half the docks and hated the Morettis with the patience of men who treated revenge like inheritance. They sent him through a medical route. Luca continued. Someone inside the clinic gave them access. Mara's stomach tightened. Dante looked at her then, and the force of his attention felt almost physical. You are no longer simply a nurse, Mara Quinn. Do not say that. You stopped a Rossetti blade from reaching me. They will know your face by dawn. Then erase it from their memory, she snapped. Dante rose too fast, pain cutting across his mouth. Mara instinctively stepped forward, catching his arm before the stitches tore. His body was solid as iron beneath the ruined shirt, warm despite the cold room. His hand closed over her wrist, not hurting her but anchoring her in place. Listen to me, he murmured. The men who came for me will come for you because you made them fail. That means you are under my protection. I do not belong to you. No, he replied, his voice dropping into a low, lethal purr. But the danger does, and I deal with what belongs to me. Mara pulled free, furious that her skin remembered the heat of his hand. I have a life. So do my enemies, Dante said softly. For now. By sunrise, the clinic had been scrubbed, the attacker had vanished into Russo custody, and Mara's ordinary life had cracked at the edges. She walked out through the staff entrance wearing her coat over teal scrubs, exhausted enough to feel hollow. 2 black cars waited across the alley. A guard stepped forward. Miss Quinn, Mr. Moretti asked us to escort you home. Mr. Moretti can ask politely next time. He said you would refuse. Then he is learning. Mara moved past him. But the second car window lowered, revealing Dante himself in the back seat. Pale, bandaged, and somehow still dressed like a man attending a hostile board meeting. Get in the car, nurse. Mara stopped under the grey morning light. You are terrible at apologies. I am excellent at survival. I survived before you entered my life, she replied. Dante's eyes held hers through the tinted glass. Not with Rossetti men hunting you. The alley seemed colder suddenly. Mara looked toward the street where commuters hurried with coffee, unaware that her name had become currency in a war she never wanted. One ride, she said. No guards at my apartment door. No men following my sister. No orders disguised as concern. Dante opened the door from inside. One ride, he agreed, which sounded exactly like a lie wearing a tailored coat. Mara climbed in anyway because fear was not cowardice when sharpened into judgment. The car smelled of leather, cedarwood, and faint antiseptic. Dante sat close enough that she could hear the restraint in his breathing. What did you do with the attacker? Mara asked. Dante looked out the window, asked questions. That is not an answer. It is the version that lets you sleep. I work trauma nights. Sleep and I are already enemies. His mouth curved slightly, and the unexpected, almost smile unsettled her more than his threats. You are difficult. You are bleeding through your bandage. He glanced down, irritated to find she was right. Mara reached into her bag, pulled out gauze, and pressed it to his side before thinking. His breath caught, not from pain alone. The space between them tightened in the back seat, filled with engine hum, and the city waking beyond rain-streaked glass. You should hate me, Dante said quietly. I am considering it, Mara replied. But professional ethics keep interrupting. The car brought her to a narrow brick building in South Boston, above a shuttered bakery her mother once owned. Dante noticed everything. The rusted fire escape, the broken camera above the side door, the pharmacy receipt tucked into Mara's bag. His gaze was not casual. It catalogued vulnerabilities. Mara hated how exposed it made her feel. Do not fix anything, she warned before stepping out. I did not speak. Your silence was making plans. He leaned back, eyes dark and unreadable. Your door camera does not work. Goodbye, Mr. Moretti. Dante, he corrected. Not to me. She closed the car door before he could answer. Upstairs, her sister Nora was asleep on the couch, with an anatomy textbook over her face. And for one soft moment, Mara allowed herself to believe danger had stayed outside. That belief lasted 9 hours. Mara woke to Nora shaking her shoulder, whispering that a man in a delivery uniform had been standing across the street for 40 minutes without delivering anything. The apartment smelled of reheated coffee and cinnamon from the bakery downstairs, but fear cut through it like bleach. Mara moved to the window and saw him reflected in the glass of the closed laundromat. Wrong shoes. Wrong posture. Wrong stillness. Her father's training woke in her body again. She pulled Nora away from the window, texted the number Dante's guard had forced into her phone, and hated herself for using it. Man. Outside. Blue cap. Watching building. The reply came almost instantly. Stay inside. Away from glass. Another message followed. I am coming. Mara stared at those 3 words longer than she should have. The street changed in less than 4 minutes. A sanitation truck stopped too abruptly at the curb. A jogger slowed near the corner. A florist van parked behind the delivery man, boxing him in without making a sound. The watcher realized too late and reached beneath his jacket. A hand closed around his wrist from behind. Another man appeared from the bakery alley. It was silent, efficient, terrifying. Nora grabbed Mara's sleeve. What did you get involved in? Mara could not answer, because the black car had arrived, and Dante stepped out, despite the bandage beneath his dark coat. He looked up at her window with such controlled fury that the distance between them seemed to vanish. When Mara opened the apartment door minutes later, he was already in the hallway. Are you hurt? He demanded. No. His gaze moved past her to Nora, who stood pale and barefoot by the kitchen. Your sister. Scared, Mara snapped. Because your war came to our home. Dante flinched barely, but she saw it. Yes. The admission robbed her anger of its easiest target. I will move you both tonight. No, Mara. Sepping is no, Mara. No, she repeated, stepping closer. You do not get to break into my life, decide I am fragile, and relocate me like expensive furniture. His eyes flashed. Fragile is not the word I would ever use for you again. The word again struck them both. Nora looked between them, suddenly understanding more than Mara wanted. Dante lowered his voice. The man outside carried your photograph. The Rossettis know your name, your address, and your family. Pride will not stop a bullet. No, Mara whispered. But obedience will not give me my life back either. Dante's expression hardened into something rawer than command. Then negotiate. The word surprised her. Men like him did not offer negotiation. They offered consequences and called them gifts. Mara folded her arms over her soft round figure, feeling the familiar instinct to become smaller and refusing it. Nora goes to our aunt's house in Maine with someone I choose driving. My mother's care facility gets discreet, security, not men frightening old women in hallways. I stay in Boston because I have shifts, patience, and a life. You keep your people where I can see them, not where they can watch me sleep. Dante listened. Actually listened. Then he nodded once. Done. Mara swallowed. That quickly. You are better at terms than half my lawyers. For 2 days, Mara's world became a careful cage. Russo cars appeared and disappeared outside the clinic. Nora called from Maine every 6 hours, pretending not to cry. Her mother's facility suddenly repaired 3 security doors and claimed an anonymous donor had funded upgrades. At work, the whispers grew teeth. Some nurses treated Mara like a hero. Others treated her like a scandal-wearing scrubs. The young resident who had looked away during Dante's insult now brought her coffee and apologized so nervously that she almost pitied him. The clinic director, however, saw only liability. He summoned Mara to his office on the third night, where Dante's name sat between them like a loaded gun. "You have brought unwanted attention here," he said. Mara stared. "I brought attention, not the assassin in your service corridor." The director's mouth thinned. "You understand the donors are concerned. I understand everyone preferred me useful and invisible." His silence answered too clearly. Before Mara could speak again, the office door opened without permission. Dante entered in a midnight suit, Luca behind him, and every word in the director's throat died. The room fell into stunned, breathless silence. Even the gold-framed medical awards on the wall seemed embarrassed to shine. Dante did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Dr. Havel," he murmured, "the woman you are reprimanding exposed your compromised security, saved your highest-risk patient, and prevented a murder inside your facility." The director went pale. "Mr. Moretti, this is an internal employment matter." Dante smiled without warmth. "Not anymore." Mara stood so quickly the chair rolled back. Dante stopped. His eyes moved to her and the room's temperature changed. He should apologize. Yes, he should. But I can ask for that myself. Something passed between them, sharp and fragile. Dante stepped back half an inch. Luca noticed. The director noticed. Mara noticed most of all. She turned to her boss. "You let people laugh when he insulted me. You let a forged badge open a secured door. Now you want to punish me, because rich men are uncomfortable that I survived loudly. So, yes, I want an apology. I also want a formal report clearing my record and a security audit that does not blame nurses for executive failures." The director swallowed hard. "Of course." Dante's eyes burned with quiet pride. Mara refused to look at him. Outside the office, Dante followed her into the mirrored corridor. "You handled that beautifully. Do not sound surprised. I am not surprised. You looked ready to buy the building and fire him into the harbor. That was one option." Mara stopped turning on him. "I am not one of your territories." "I know. Do you?" He stepped closer but did not touch her. His restraint felt deliberate now, almost painful. "I am learning." The words should not have affected her. They did. Around them, clinic staff pretended not to stare. Conversations sputtered out. Eyes widened. The crowd physically parted, not because Dante demanded it, but because power had entered the hallway and chosen to stand beside the nurse it had once mocked. Mara felt the shift in their faces, and it frightened her how much part of her needed it. That night, Dante sent no flowers, no jewelry, no dress. Instead, he sent a handwritten note and a file folder. The note read, "You asked for respect, not decoration." Inside the folder were official clinic reports, security camera stills, and evidence that the forged badge had been approved by someone in administration 2 hours before the attack. Mara sat at her kitchen table until dawn, reading every page. There it was, the first thread of the real secret. Her director had not merely been careless. Someone inside the clinic had helped the Rossettis, then tried to make Mara's presence the scandal that distracted from it. At 6, Dante called. "You found it," he said. "You knew." "I suspected. And you let me read it first." His silence carried answer enough. "You said you were not furniture," he murmured. "I believed you." By evening, the trap was set in the clinic's conference room. Mara wore navy scrubs, not red silk, because she wanted every person present to remember she had earned this ground in uniform. The director sat at the table with 2 board members, sweating through his collar. Dante stood near the glass wall with Luca, and 3 silent men looking less like a visitor than a verdict. Mara placed the folder on the table. "The forged badge was approved from your administrative login," she told the director. "The attacker knew treatment room 2 before Mr. Moretti arrived. The security lockout was delayed by 12 minutes. That delay came from this office." The director stammered, denied, blamed. A technician blamed software, blamed everyone except himself. Then Luca played the recording. The director's voice filled the room, thin and unmistakable, promising a Rossetti contact access in exchange for clearing a gambling debt. The board members recoiled, as if sound could stain them. Mara felt no triumph, only a cold, steady sadness. "You risked patience," she whispered. The director looked at her then, not at Dante. Desperation made him cruel. "You think you are special because a gangster likes big women. You are still just a heavy nurse who got lucky." The room stopped breathing. Dante's face went empty, which was worse than anger, but Mara lifted one hand before he could move. "No," she said softly. "Luck is what protected you from me the first time you let people laugh." She leaned forward. "This time, documentation will do the damage." Dante's mouth curved faintly. The director's career ended before midnight. His fall came in layers just as Dante preferred. First came exposure. The board suspended him pending investigation, and the clinic sealed his access before he reached the elevator. Then came money. His private accounts, already strained by gambling debt, froze when regulators opened inquiries into missing donor funds. Then came status. Men who had toasted him at charity dinners stopped taking his calls. His wife left their Beacon Hill home with 2 suitcases and a lawyer who wanted distance from scandal. Finally came safety. The Rossettis, furious that his failed scheme had cost them leverage, sent a message through channels even Mara did not want explained. By the next afternoon, the director was begging federal agents for protective custody. Dante told Mara only the legal parts. She suspected there were other parts. She did not ask. The Rossettis did not collapse so easily. Cornered families became dangerous, and Vincent Rossetti was not a man who forgave humiliation. He sent one final invitation to Dante through the old rules. A meeting at an abandoned fish market near the harbor where truces used to be negotiated, before the city became too digital for honor. Dante intended to go without telling Mara. Mara discovered it because Luca, unlike Dante, had begun to respect her judgment more than Dante's pride. "He will walk into a room built to kill him," Luca told her in the clinic stairwell. "He believes if he ends it alone you get your life back." Mara stared at him. "And you are telling me because Luca's silver eyes softened by one careful degree. Because he is wrong and you are the only person he listens to when wrong costs him." Mara found Dante in the underground garage fastening a holster beneath his jacket with one hand still stiff from injury. "Were you planning to leave a note?" she demanded. He turned slowly. "You should be in Maine with your sister. And you should be in follow-up care, but apparently we are both disappointing people tonight." His eyes darkened. "This is not your fight. It became my fight when a man with my photograph stood outside my home. I am trying to end that." By dying dramatically in a fish market, Dante's jaw tightened. By making sure Rossetti never reaches you again. Mara stepped close enough to smell cedarwood and gun oil. "You still think protection means removing my choices?" He looked at her for a long moment. "I think love means standing between you and the blade." The word love landed with devastating silence. Dante seemed as surprised as Mara by its escape. Engines hummed nearby. A guard pretended not to hear. Mara's anger faltered, but only for a breath. "Then learn this," she whispered. "Standing beside me works better." The fish market smelled of salt, rust, old wood, and ghosts. Mara entered through the rear with Luca while Dante walked in front as bait, furious that she had won and terrified because she had. Vincent Rossetti waited beneath hanging chains surrounded by men who looked at Mara and underestimated her in the same old fatal way. "This is the nurse." Vincent laughed. "Dante, I expected you to bring an army, not a mattress with legs." The insult sliced the room open. Dante moved, but Mara touched his wrist. "Not hard. Enough. Let him speak," she murmured. Vincent smiled, wider mistaking restraint for weakness. "You should have stayed in your clinic, sweetheart." Mara looked around the room, noting wet concrete, stacked crates, hooks, chains, exits, uneven footing. Her father's voice returned calm, as a hand between her shoulders. "Rooms tell the truth before men do." Vincent lifted his chin. "Give us the nurse, Dante, and we let your sister's shipping line breathe another year." There it was, the deeper secret. This was never only about revenge. The Rossettis wanted control of Moretti's shipping routes, and Mara had become the pressure point. Dante's face became lethal. "You do not bargain with her life." Mara stepped forward before the guns rose. "No," she said. He does not, and neither do you. The first Rossetti man lunged because men like him always believed softness waited to be grabbed. Mara pivoted, caught his wrist, and used the wet floor against him. He went down hard. The second reached for her from behind, but she dropped her weight, drove an elbow into his ribs, and slammed him into a crate. The room exploded. Dante and Luca moved with terrifying precision, but Mara saw the real danger before anyone else. A third man above them on the loading platform with a clear angle on Dante. She grabbed a hanging chain, yanked with both hands, and sent a row of rusted hooks swinging into the man's legs. He screamed, stumbled, and his shot cracked into the ceiling. Dante turned, saw what she had done, and for half a second battle vanished from his face, replaced by astonished devotion. The fight ended fast after that. Russo men flooded the market from both entrances because Dante had learned at least one lesson and allowed backup. Vincent Rossetti was forced to his knees on the wet concrete, breathing hard, his expensive coat ruined by fish, water, and fear. Mara stood beside Dante, hair loose from its clip scrubs, darkened at the hem body, steady and unashamed. Vincent spat bloodless curses, promising lawyers, judges, cousins war. Dante crouched before him with predatory calm. "You had a chance to leave Boston alive and proud," he murmured. "Instead, you threatened the woman who saved my life." Vincent glared at Mara. "She is nothing." Dante's eyes went black. "No, she is the reason you are kneeling." Mara looked down at Vincent and felt absolutely nothing but pity. His world had become too small to understand her. After that night, Boston whispered Mara Quinn's name differently. Not as gossip, not as insult, as warning. The Rossetti organization fractured under raids, betrayals, and the sudden courage of witnesses who realized the Morettis were no longer the weaker storm. The clinic director testified to save himself and gave prosecutors enough to bury 3 Rossetti fronts. Vincent disappeared into custody under a name nobody printed. Dante kept most of the shadows away from Mara. But he no longer treated her like someone too delicate for truth. He told her when danger shifted. He asked before placing guards. He listened when she refused. 2 weeks later, a black box arrived at Mara's apartment, carried not by a soldier but by Nora, who had clearly been recruited by charm and cannoli. "Do not glare," Nora said. He asked permission to send it. Inside the box lay a ruby-red dress, structured, elegant, and heavy enough to feel like armor. It was designed to celebrate, not conceal, with a neckline that honored her fullness and a waist that made no apology for the body beneath it. A note rested on cream paper. "A queen should never wear colors, meant to disappear. Dinner at 8, only if she chooses." Mara read the last 4 words twice. Only if she chooses. That was new. That mattered. Nora leaned over her shoulder, grinning. "He is learning." Mara tried to look unimpressed. "He is dangerous. So are you." That silenced her. At 8, Mara wore the dress because she wanted to, not because Dante commanded it. When she stepped into the private dining room above the harbor, Dante rose as if a throne had entered before its queen. The room overlooked black water, scattered with gold reflections. Candles burned beside white roses, not red, and the table held lemon risotto, roasted sea-base figs with honey and chocolate tort, dusted with espresso. Dante wore a bespoke charcoal suit, his wound nearly healed his posture, still carrying the weight of an empire. But when he looked at Mara, power softened into reverence so complete it made her chest ache. "You came," he murmured. "You asked. I am trying. I noticed." He took her hand, but did not kiss it until she allowed her fingers to relax inside his. The gesture felt more intimate than any command he had ever given. During dinner, he asked about her father, not as a tactic, but as a man trying to understand the hands that had shaped her courage. Mara told him about the basement mats, the smell of old leather the night her father came home bruised but alive, and said fear was only information, not instruction. Dante told her about inheriting the Moretti family after his older brother was killed, about becoming ruthless before grief had somewhere else to go. "I thought cruelty kept people from seeing weakness," he admitted. "It only showed them where you were wounded," Mara replied. He smiled faintly. "You always cut clean." "Occupational hazard. The warmth between them grew slowly, dangerously, without needing to be named. Then Luca entered, escorting the ruined former clinic director. The man looked smaller now, stripped of title suit, wrinkled arrogance, drained into panic. He saw Mara in red beside Dante and stopped walking, as if the past had struck him. "Please," he whispered, not to Dante, but to her. "Tell them I helped. Tell them I cooperated." Mara watched him shake and remembered his office, his contempt, the way he had tried to make her body the insult that hid his crime. "You did cooperate," she said calmly. Hope flashed across his face. "After you endangered patients, sold access to murderers, blamed staff, and called me lucky for surviving." His hope died. "I was desperate." "That may explain a wound," Mara replied. "It does not excuse where you aimed the knife." Dante stood behind her, silent, letting her decide the shape of the moment. She looked at the director and felt the final chain inside her loosen. "I do not want revenge," she said. "I want you to tell the truth in court and live long enough to remember who you tried to bury." Luca took the man away. Dante remained still until the door closed. "You are more merciful than I am. That is why I am a nurse, and why you are stronger than every man in that room." Mara turned toward him, the ruby dress catching candlelight over her lush, generous curves. "Do not put me on a pedestal either. It is just another place where a woman can fall." Dante came closer, slowly, giving her every chance to step back. "Then stand on the ground beside me." His voice was a dangerous rumble, stripped of arrogance. "Not beneath me. Not behind me. Beside me." Mara looked up into his dark, fathomless eyes and saw the man who had mocked her, the man who had apologized, the man who had changed because she demanded more. "Are you afraid of me?" he asked. "No," Mara whispered. "But I was afraid you would only love the version of me who saved you." Dante's face tightened as if the thought wounded him. "I was a fool before you saved me. I am not asking for the woman who disarmed an attacker. I am asking for the woman who stayed steady while I bled, who tells me the truth when my whole world bows, who carries softness like strength and strength like breath." He lifted his hand, stopping short of her cheek. "May I?" She nodded. His large, calloused palm touched her, gently warm despite every cold thing he had done in life. "You are not fat, Mara. You are a goddess, lush and soft and perfect. Anyone who made you feel less was blind. I was blindest of all." The kiss came like a promise rather than a conquest. Dante did not take it. He waited until Mara rose into him, until her hands closed over the lapels of his charcoal suit, until the space between them disappeared by choice. Outside, Boston Harbor moved under the moon, black and bright as a blade washed clean. Inside, the Mafia boss, who once mistook softness for weakness, held the nurse who had taught him real power. They would say Dante Moretti mocked the wrong woman. They would say Mara Quinn disarmed an attacker without blinking. But the truth was sharper. She disarmed his arrogance first. Did you love seeing Mara rise from mocked nurse to the queen Dante had to earn? Hit that like button, share this story, and subscribe for more. Drop a comment below telling us whether Dante deserved her forgiveness.